for having us today for this panel about company culture and relationships as a source of competitive advantage. We'll see about this part. Well, as mentioned, my name is Bertrand. I'm professor of organizational behavior and human resource management at EHL Hospitality Business School. And today I'm very glad because I have four amazing panelists joining me today for this conversation on company culture. So first, please welcome Aseel, Hussain, Bondagjy. So, please. Aseel is the Hotel Talent Development Manager at NEOM Hotel Division. And of course, we all know how NEOM is famous for its innovation. That definitely translates into talent development and organizational culture. Please also welcome Paul Keane. So Paul Keane is Director of Project Management at Quo. Quo is a branding agency that harnesses culture to build brands, and Paul oversees project management and operations, looking at how company culture can create better brands. Today with us, we also have William-Harley Fleming. So William, please come join us. So William is COO at Millennium and Copthorne Hotels Resorts MEA, and of course he's a highly regarded leader in the hospitality industry. He's known for his work in developing, launching, and managing five-star hotels and resorts across the UAE, Thailand, Malaysia, and the UK markets. Did I miss anything? Perfect, nice. And lastly, we have Eddy Tannous. So he's CEO at Rotana. No need to present Rotana.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, CEO at Rotana. He spent his whole career in luxury hospitality, right? And if I get it right, Middle East, Africa, India over the past 23 years. He currently oversees the operational performance at all properties under the Rotana brands. And he was the GM when Aseel was an intern. So we'll come back to that. So before anything, when we talk about culture, and this is my little teacher, like OB professor point that I want to make, what do we talk about when we talk about organizational culture? So culture, it's quite broad, right? We have many ideas when we think about culture. But one thing that we have to keep in mind is the basic way of defining organizational culture is the way we do things around here is something that makes us different from anyone else. And you know, I've had the privilege from studying many companies, going to many places, going to many different hotels too. And there is no single place that is exactly the same as another one. There is always this little cultural thing. So that's something that fascinates me. And another point that I don't want to spoil the party, but culture comes from the top and also from the bottom. Culture comes from the top when we say, well, we define our values, we define who we are, but culture also comes from the bottom. Culture is embedded in the behavior, in the norms, in the values of every single employee. So this is what we are dealing with today. And today, we're going to start the conversation by, let's say, setting the general scene. And how can we define a strong company culture in hospitality? Let's start with you, Aseel. So, how does NEOM core values shape a strong company culture in hospitality?
So in NEOM, we do have our main core values, and those values are curiosity, diversity, respect, care, and catalyst. And we, by embodying all of these values, we have created the environment that aligns with our strategic vision and the development of young talents and empowering them to drive the innovations and excellences within the NEOM Hotels division.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this. Now, we talked about the young talents. We talked about culture being, let's say, witnessed in the behavior of people. Paul, in your experience, how can we embed also guests in this adventure into creating this organizational culture?
So embedding the guests is a
very, very interesting point. And I think it begins with setting up a company culture that's extremely strong from the foundation within the employees themselves. And going off of what Aseel just said, mentioning those values is extremely important, but where they come from, I think, is what needs to be established. And NEOM is a great example of an organization that is strongly rooted in a purpose, strongly rooted in a why. And having that why, establishing that why for the brand, for the employees, is the first step to ensuring that the guests receive that culture that's then created in the places, in the shared spaces, and in hospitality. So I think that the emphasis on establishing a purpose from the get-go is a fundamental cornerstone of company culture.
Purpose. Yes, that's very nice that we talk about purpose. So, because we had this conversation before with Eddy, and you were talking about like how Rotana became to what it is right now. So can you tell us a little bit more about this, like what this spark, this ignition that created this brand now and how it impacts the culture?
Yeah, company, first of all, it's good to be here. Very proud to be also on a panel with you, Aseel. It shows the importance of, you know, the growth in our industry and new talent being there all the time. Before I talk about Rotana, I want to talk about culture embedded in the DNA of a company. Because the way you start a company and the values you put in from the beginning will determine who you are on the long term. Rotana in 1992, 1993, our two founders started this company with a great deal of attention to, they wanted to prove to everyone that they can take care of the asset, that they will deliver on that relationship. And that stayed embedded in our culture moving forward. But I think the most endearing part of it all is it was always focused on people and focusing on having the right people around, having the human connection with all stakeholders. You know, and today as we move forward in the transition of our company, I remember some CEOs saying, we are in the business of fees, and I remember CEOs saying to that previous topic, which is the current CEO we have, it's all about the guest, and the person who takes care of the guest is the employee on the ground. So if you have that culture embedded in your company, then you're delivering.
Amazing. And so now if we can have a bit of a more of an international outlook on this, do you see this, let's say, attention for the guest being embedded in experiences worldwide? Do you see differences? Do you see patterns?
I think from an international flair, looking at it on a bigger scale, culture is a well-used word, should I say, in our industry, but it's actually living the culture. I think that is something that's actually putting it into place. So I think culture is about making sure all the stakeholders, whether it be our owners, whether it be our employees, whether it be our guests, they're all part of that culture. Now, the culture is created by having a very clear vision, mission, values. We all know that. But actually, it's living those day in, day out, and having that integrity, that consistency, and that transparency that creates a culture. Culture can make or break any company, whether it be in hospitality, whether it be in anything else. In our business, it's about people. And having people at the front of everything that we do and ensuring they're aligned, they're engaged, they're empowered, creates a very positive culture. I think that's really what we do well in the business of the people business. We heard earlier that the last talk was about the culture and the people and the importance of people. But actually, it's ensuring all stakeholders are fully aligned in what you're trying to achieve and the positive culture that the business takes forward.
Now, I want to hear more about that because I love this idea of alignment, and I also think it's the greatest challenge of hospitality. If you think about, well, brands, famous brands or famous groups, how do you translate that from the corporate level to the, well, brands level and then to the hotel level? Maybe we can start with you since you have different brands.
That's a great question, Bertrand, and I think it's a big challenge to a lot of the operators now because the model changed, right? It used to be about the main brand and this is what the name of your hotel is, and now there's multi-brands. I go back to the base. The initial value, core value system of your company has to be the same across. So I'll give an example. If your focus is on people, if you hire based on talent and not based on experience, and you grow that talent, if you focus on these pillars, that's the core system that you have, the value system that you have as a company. Then when you move into the different brands and how you avoid having the brand creep, as we call it, from one brand to another, is you need to understand who your customer is and how you deliver those same sets of values, but to the expectations of that customer. So if you're managing a luxury hotel, there are sets of expectations that you need to deliver on. If you're managing a lifestyle hotel, there are other sets of expectations. But at the end of the day, we are all consumers and we want the same thing from a hotel experience. We want to be taken care of. We want our problems to be resolved if they happen immediately. And that culture is the same for all the brands, but it's translated in a different way, depending on which brand we talk about.
Fascinating. So Paul, you look from, as a consultant, witnessing different brands. How do you see the role of guests in this culture? Like literally on a day-to-day basis, how can we as organizations have the guests that we want that can help our culture? Because we can select our people, but we cannot necessarily select our guests, can we?
I think that when you're looking at selection or you're looking at the demand or the target audience or what we call typologies, very specifically defined guest segments, the culture is essential in the types of segments that you're going to attract. And alluding to the title of this session, looking at relationships, and I think it's a very, very good point that while the core remains the same, while the purpose may remain the same, those nuances based on the brand itself, exactly the way in which we want to draw in different guest segments, becomes extremely important. If we want to try and define a brand and we want to create those nuances, what are the types of relationships that we want our employees to have with different segments of guests? And how are we going to tailor that culture in order to attract the guests? And working with brands across the world, you notice that while the brand pillars may stay the same, really you need to get very specific in terms of the way in which you're going to generate not just the relationships between the employees and the guests, but also the types of relationships that you want the guests to cultivate in your spaces.
Very nice, very interesting. So yeah, if I hear you right, we can even attract specific segments of guests in the same way that we can attract specific segments of employees. I'm HR, I'm not marketing. Sorry. All right, so now moving to attraction, talent attraction. How does NEOM attract? Because now there's a lot of people to attract. How do you do that?
Yes, so we attracted the talents that are really passionate about hospitality and joining NEOM, and also we're looking for the talents who are seeking a workplace where they feel that they are valued and supported. So when we start the recruitment, for example, of our students, we don't just consider recruiting students. They are our future employees. They are our future leaders for NEOM hotels. And they are our ambassadors. And during the FHS, we do have 2 of our students representing the culinary art programs. And they are here, Sana and Mishal. We're so happy and proud to have them. So they are not just studying, they are playing a role in representing us. And also we have developed 2 partnerships with different entities. The first one with Zadak Academy, which is a culinary art academy in Saudi Arabia, in Al-Khubar. We do have 3 batches, and the first one about to graduate this year, and they're ready to join us. And the second one is a partnership with EHL. And we have our first group there, and they started the bachelor degree in September, and there is another batch to start by February 2025.
Thank you, that's great. I like this idea of having more than just a job, but being involved in the organization and in the future. Is it something that resonates with your experience at Rotana?
One of the things that I think motivates talent the most is the journey. Where is this going to get me? We all find a job because obviously the first goal is I want to make some money because I want to spend and but at the end of the day, once you get into that career path, where is this going to get me? And this is where you define talent that really wants to move forward long term with you. So by creating that ecosystem that shows them where they can get to and that allows them to grow within the ecosystem, then obviously you're going to have motivated talent if you've selected the right talent.
Yeah.
If you select correctly. So do you have tips and tricks for the audience?
Yeah, of course. Let me pull up. Listen, again, it goes back to the value system. I think, a lot of us made the mistake of hiring based on experience because sometimes it's just the necessity of the job. You need someone who knows that technical part of the job. But if you're privileged enough and if you can take that risk as an organization and hire based on talent, and hire based on what you think is that same DNA that you have in the company and that you want your company to have, then it becomes easier. You might not find, you might not be right from the first time in your selection, but the more of that DNA you have in the company, the easier it becomes to attract that talent, because people, it's a small market. People know each other. They know what's happening in each country. You're a great representative of your organization, Aseel, because you keep talking about that human environment, and that's what you need to create.
So just one thing, so we always say it's all about, the quality, it's not just about the quantity. So when we recruit for our programs, we really make sure that we are choosing the right talents, and this is something that is helping us as well, not just the company, but also, helping the students and their progress in their career.
Thank you. So I love this idea that, idea that it's quality over quantity, and that you obviously want to avoid choosing the wrong talent. I think that in the luxury industry, we also have higher requirements, right? We cannot put anyone in front of any customer. So from your side, what do you think?
I couldn't agree with you more, but I think it goes back to the fundamental principles is you can take the right person and train them and develop them. But actually, it's the selection at the very offset that is essential. As I say to a lot of my teams and general managers, that you can't train personality or attitude. So it's making sure you get the right personality and the right attitude at the beginning, at the offset. Everything else you can develop, train, work on, groom, buddy systems, the whole process can be done. But you've got to get the right talent at the beginning. Our industry is a very tough industry. It's a lot of long hours. It's very rewarding as you see your careers grow. Going back very simply, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is there. As you know that from an HR perspective, they want the job first. They want to feed themselves. And then they want security. And then they want aspiration. They want to grow. And I think there's a lot of good examples in hospitality, in our business, in all sectors, whether it be in the economy range or in the luxury range, people going through their careers. And as you said, there's examples in this room and around the room. It's a small industry. Everybody knows everyone. Everyone's seen everyone. And the biggest sense of achievement that anybody can have in a senior leadership role is actually seeing people grow through the hierarchy, go through the ranks, and learn and grow. And you know that person's come from the beginning and worked through. So experience, yes, it's important. Yes, knowledge is important. But actually at the very, very offset, it's about personality and attitude. If you get that right, they will flourish within our business.
That's really good. Personality and attitude. And I go back to this idea of DNA that you mentioned too. It's like you have the DNA of the brand. You have to make sure that people, match the DNA of the brand. Now, Paul, you will be acting as our token Gen Z person in the panel discussion. Yeah. We also have to welcome this new generation of talent in the industry. Now, are there new cultural norms, expectations that we need to welcome in the industry? What's your mind?
Well, I think it's interesting, this idea of the triple bottom line has been mentioned a number of times now throughout the conference, and I think that idea of people, especially in younger generations, joining organizations not based on the amount of money that they're going to make, but the purpose behind the organization itself. And I think that being able to hire and attract talent that is truly aligned with the purpose of the organization is extremely important. And that doesn't mean that it needs to be a niche or a very specific purpose, but it needs to be a purpose that really motivates individuals and gets them to feel as though they're contributing towards something that's bigger than themselves, or towards a certain social idea that is particularly salient to them. So having that as a way in which we're going to attract top talent, I think is extremely important, and that then comes down to what was just mentioned in terms of the values. And if everything is drawn down from the purpose, then I think as younger generations are entering the workforce, it's that purpose that they will get behind. But I think that also really speaks to the organization. What was mentioned as well about caring about the individual is also something that can't be neglected. While the purpose of the organization and the core values are something that everybody needs to band together towards, there also still needs to be a specific emphasis on individual needs, individual career paths, where that person wants to go, even if it's not necessarily with your organization.
I think there's also an element of being culturally sensitive. So depending where you work and what environment you're working in the world, I think being culturally sensitive and understanding the guest that's coming to your hotels and having that localization. I'm a big fan for localization because people want to experience hotels. Hotels are about people. Earlier they were talking about AI, it's fantastic, but that is really making the processes more efficient. But in front of the guest, in front of the consumer, in front of the owner, in front of your partners, that's what they want, that interaction, that human interaction. And I think that's really, again, back to the culture, the values, the attitude, the personality, and really getting that liveliness and really getting that vibe within your hotels. Now, you find that if it's at the luxury end, if it's more the lifestyle end, you don't want it so processed or stiff, you want it more relaxed. So again, it's adapting that as you go along, but if you've got the right values, the right people, the right ethos, you can grow the brands and you can really get the younger generation now really engage in hospitality. But it's not so long previously where it was, you do the hours, you get on with it. No, they want to feel valued. They want to be part of the business. They want to see that growth, and they want to see their ideas, their suggestions. So a little bit like you said earlier, leadership comes from, or culture comes from the top, but it also comes from the bottom. That younger generation have a lot more ideas, thoughts. They want to be heard. And it's no longer you follow and you get on with it. You've got to be part of that. And there's some great ideas, and those individuals, definitely at the bottom end of the business, are far more in touch with our guests than the general managers are of the properties. There's a lot more ideas and initiatives that come from that lower end, and it's creating that culture of your business that is essential nowadays.
Love it. I love it because, again, well, you put people first, and they are, again, yeah, you can have the great corporate culture that you want, but in the end, it's the interaction with the guest that speaks volumes. Right. Now, I'm going to ask the difficult question. Cool, we figured out purpose is needed to attract. But what do we do? How can we retain? How can we make sure that people actually stay? Because the industry has several issues with turnover. Yeah. So maybe Eddy.
First of all, I'm a bit upset you didn't refer to us to represent Gen Z because we're young enough, so we can talk about it. I really think it's all linked. You know, you attract the talent that has the same DNA, you know what motivates them, or you'd hope you know what motivates them. And, you know, so if your company is at a stage where it's, let's say, growing or moving to the next level or expanding, then you need people who want to go with you on that journey. So you know what motivates them. What motivates them is being able to grow with the company. We've seen a lot of companies that preach a lot of good things, but then you go to the hotel and you don't feel it. It's not tangible. It's not something you can calculate, the engagement that you feel. And we've seen hotels where you walk in, and this is basically how I tell if I have a good GM or not. When I walk in and I start interacting with the team and I see how they interact with the guests, and I see that, a very friendly, or I don't know how to describe it, but a very genuine, I would say, approach, you know you have the right GM because you know you have the right leadership. So once you have that talent in, you cannot be false to that promise. You have to deliver on that promise because they're going to leave you, and they leave you forever. So some companies, which I'm not going to mention obviously, but have made that promise, but then you go in and you don't feel it. And some companies are actually understated, where you go in and you see length of service. I'm very proud to say at Rotana, we keep saying we have well over thousands of years of experience within Rotana, if you count people who have been with the company for more than 15 to 20 years, which is very, very important. But it's also an indication that they are finding their motivation every day they come to work. You obviously need to have a mix of new blood coming in every once in a while, but find that motivational spot. What motivates your talent pool? Listen to them, talk to them. This is another thing that sometimes we assume we know, and then we go with a directive, and 90% of the time we're wrong because we didn't listen. We didn't understand what the company wants, what the employees want, what we can do to fuel that motivation in them.
Yeah, I think it really resonates with when you mentioned about transparency. Transparency is both ways, right? It's communication top down, but also bottom up. You have to have this transparency in both directions in order to have a transparent culture where everyone speaks the same way. Now, I may have a challenging question, and I don't know. You can decide who picks it up, but we talked about culture and making sure that we are aligned and that we do the same thing. But what about when we need to change? When we need to adapt our ways or even change our culture? How do we approach that? Paul, this one is for you.
Well, I think we've really touched on this, and I'm glad we've established this idea of co-creation, that the greater the employee satisfaction, the greater the guest satisfaction, and how that mutually reinforces itself. And there are so many people that have stood on this stage and talked about numbers when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to finance, but measuring culture is very difficult. And we are in the business of creating brands, and that's really just a glorified way of saying creating culture. And we find it difficult to measure our success, because how do you measure culture? How do you measure relationships and the richness that a relationship between two team members is, and how do you measure the relationship between a team member and a guest? So, I mean, back to your question, how do you change? I think it's difficult to know which direction to change in if you haven't really thought about the way that you're going to measure how successful the culture is that you're trying to implement. And I think that that's a challenge for all of us, is to start thinking about culture in a way that it's something that we can measure, we can collect evidence on, and we can use that evidence to create more robust, more dynamic, more localized, and more relevant cultures.
I think change, just to touch on that, I think is always difficult. I think the natural human being doesn't like change. We like routine, we like consistency. So I think it's understanding that change is always difficult. And I think it's about educating, it's about communicating, it's about guiding. And I think that is really when we try to change direction in our organizations, or there's a new process coming through, it's understanding that from the bottom up and top down, everybody at every part of the organization needs to be engaged with that change. Otherwise, the change will fail. And if you haven't got everyone on board, you're not going to succeed, and the change won't happen. It may happen for a short term, but natural human beings will revert back to the old way of doing things. And I think that's where you see definitely where cultural understanding comes in. Different cultures and different ways of adapting change in different parts of the world. In Thailand, it's completely different to the culture and the way that people interact and behave, to the way it is in the Middle East, to how it is in Europe. Europe, in many aspects, are far more agile. They will make the change, but it's a lot more temporary workforce. Where actually, if you go somewhere like the Middle East or Asia, you've got to understand the impact of that change, because they're supporting their families. There's a whole ecosystem behind that. So therefore, before changing something, leaders need to understand what the impact of the change is and get the buy-in from everyone.
Yeah, just to add a little bit on that, it's the why rather than the how. When your team knows why that change is required and where is it going to take us and what's the vision, they will come up with how to affect it, to do this change, and then you don't need to tell them. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's very nice. Yeah, the why rather than the how. And so at NEOM, you're building the culture from scratch.
Yes.
It's the beginning of, well, it's still well started, but it's still the beginning of the journey. So how do you make sure that you go in the right direction?
Yeah. So I was just, while they're talking, I was just thinking about how about if something, if they decided to change, part of the culture, but because our core values, are very, very clear, such as the catalyst. So we all know in NEOM that we are a part of the change. We are doing something new. We always have that kind of challenges, and obstacles. So the type of environment helping us to be more agile, flexible. So and having the transparency is the key, as he mentioned. So I think when we have a strong core values and your employees are living those values, I think it will not be that difficult if you want to have that kind of changes. And the nature of NEOM, projects is helping us, I think, when it's come to all of these kind of changes in the culture.
That makes a lot of sense. So I guess for a last question, we'll go back to the individual level. You are all leaders, right? You all have your voice. You all have something that you do, hopefully, well, probably right if you're here. So I would like to hear from you. Maybe we start with you, Aseel. You're a young Saudi woman in the hospitality industry. So what does the project of NEOM mean to you? How do you think you can play a role in that?
Yeah. So, yeah, being part of NEOM is a dream that come true, because NEOM is not just it's not just a project to be part of. it gave me the opportunity to contribute to the Saudi Vision 2030 by empowering, developing young Saudi talent in the hospitality and tourism industry. And also it gave me the chance to pay the country back. And I'm saying that because I was lucky and privileged to be part of the first scholarship program for Saudi women to study hospitality and tourism management by the Saudi Tourism Authority back in 2009. So this has helped me to inspire the young women, the young generation, and also show them what a career looks like in hospitality. And I feel so proud to be part of this project. And for me, it's not just a job. This is not just a job. It's something that's close to my heart. And I hope that I can inspire more young women, to join the hospitality industry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's very touching. Well, now I think we have to ask for the mentor.
Can't follow that. She did so well. They're not going to clap for me.
You know what? Actually, when preparing for the roundtable, I talked to Aseel, and she spoke really ways about Eddy. So now, Eddy, you must have been doing something right.
We have an arrangement.
What is it?
But can I just say something? We just had a very nice conversation here, and I just want to say about him something that I experienced with him. It shows how humbled he is, and the support that I was getting from him. And even last time, early this year in FHS, I was awarded, and he was there, and supporting me. So this is, I think, the type of culture that a leader should really create.
Again, I'm super proud of you, Aseel, and
Thank you.
I think we're going to keep seeing you in higher and higher places. And then I can say this girl used to work with us.
No, that's nice. So that's
after all this, you're going to have to repeat the question because
what is your best practice as a leader so that people are so inspired by you?
Listen, I don't think there's a recipe. Honestly, I think do it from the heart. I think we all started somewhere, and we all at some point had that hand to hold us, to maybe help us move that one step further. I'm always a strong believer that you have to do things yourself. You have to create your own opportunities, but you need also the environment to help you. And so I've been lucky to have those leaders in my life, and I try to do the same as well. One of the things that change and things are moving forward, and we cannot stop that. So we have to learn from the newcomers. We have to learn on how things can be done differently. So if you listen, the word listen, I think, can sum it up. Listen to the people you work with, whether they just started working with you or whether they've been in the industry for 60 years or whether they founded the company. But by listening, you understand more and you connect with people. And I think people appreciate that when they see that they have a voice, when they feel that they are part of what's being in the making. And you don't always agree. There's always disagreements. I disagree with my boss all the time. He's sitting here, he's looking at me. But you have to listen. You really have to respect every single interaction you have with any single colleague that you have, regardless of who they are and what their sole responsibilities are.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
That's twice.
You have a second?
Yeah.
So I think we're going short with the time. So if I can just wrap up on this point, I love what you both mentioned, and I think that we could find some very important points about organizational culture. My big takeaway is a culture is always built in interactions, and we should not negate the role of customers, guests in these interactions, and we should build this culture in accordance with guests, in accordance with employees, not putting anyone on the side. And more than anything, we should always spend some time to listen to make sure that everyone is included and is part of the same culture. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.